How does one night of fun at a work party end with a stack of legal documents dropped on your doorstep? What would you do if your husband, the one you always thought would forgive anything, suddenly turned your whole world upside down with cold, calculated revenge? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The TechWorks office had been transformed into something barely recognizable. Colorful streamers hung from the fluorescent lights, and someone had pushed all the desks against the walls to create a makeshift dance floor. The annual company party was in full swing, and I, Ferelith Crane, was finally feeling alive for the first time in months. "Come on, Ferelith, you're barely drinking." Leo Madsen appeared beside me with 2 fresh cocktails, his charming smile making my stomach flutter in a way it hadn't in years. At 31, Leo was everything my husband Evan wasn't: spontaneous, exciting, and completely focused on me. I took the drink gratefully, already feeling the warm buzz from the previous 2. I shouldn't. Evan's been texting me about getting home for Sasha's bedtime. Leo rolled his eyes dramatically. "You're a grown woman, not a teenager with a curfew. When's the last time you actually had fun?" He was right, wasn't he? When was the last time Evan had looked at me the way Leo was looking at me right now? When had my husband last made me feel desirable instead of just useful? My phone buzzed again. Another text from Evan. "Sasha keeps asking for you. Can you come home soon?" I shoved the phone back in my purse without responding. Why couldn't he handle one bedtime routine by himself? I worked just as hard as he did, maybe harder. I deserved this. "That's the spirit," Leo said, noticing my defiant gesture. "You know what? I think you need to really let loose tonight." The music was getting louder, and more coworkers were gathering around us. Jennifer from accounting was already dancing, and Mike from IT was attempting some embarrassing moves that had everyone laughing. The atmosphere was infectious. "I don't know," I said, but I was already swaying to the music. "I'm not really a dancer." "Bullshit," Leo laughed. "I've seen you at these things before. You're always so buttoned up, so proper. But there's something wild underneath all that HR coordinator professionalism, isn't there?" His words hit something deep inside me. Wild. When had anyone called me wild? Evan certainly never had. He liked me predictable, reliable, safe. But maybe that wasn't who I really was. "You know what?" I downed the rest of my cocktail in one gulp. "You're absolutely right." The next thing I knew, I was in the middle of the dance floor, moving to the pounding bass in ways that would have horrified my mother-in-law, Ruth. Leo was right behind me, his hands finding my waist as we moved together. The other coworkers were cheering us on, and for the first time in years, I felt like the center of attention in the best possible way. "Get on the table," someone shouted. I couldn't tell who it was over the music, but suddenly, everyone was chanting it. "Table, table, table." There was a sturdy conference table pushed against one wall, and before I could think twice about it, Leo was helping me climb up. The view from up there was incredible. Dozens of faces looking up at me with admiration and excitement. When had anyone looked at me like that? I started dancing again, this time with the confidence that comes from being the star of the show. Leo climbed up beside me, his hands never leaving my body as we moved together. I could feel his breath on my neck, could smell his cologne mixing with the alcohol on both our breaths. "You're incredible," he whispered in my ear, and I believed him. The crowd below was going wild. People were taking pictures, recording videos, laughing and cheering. I felt like a celebrity, like someone worth watching. At home, I was just mom, just wife, just the person who handled bedtime routines and grocery shopping. But here, I was Ferelith, desirable, exciting, alive. Leo's hands were getting bolder, sliding down my sides, pulling me closer against him. In the back of my mind, some small voice was trying to warn me that this was going too far, that people were watching, that I was married. But that voice was easily drowned out by the music and the alcohol and the intoxicating feeling of being wanted. I don't remember exactly when we climbed down from the table or when Leo suggested we find somewhere more private to talk. I have vague memories of his office, of his hands in my hair, of forgetting entirely about Evan and Sasha and all the responsibilities waiting for me at home. The next thing I clearly remember is waking up in my own bed the next morning, still wearing my party dress, with a pounding headache and 17 missed calls from Evan. The sunlight streaming through our bedroom window felt like needles in my brain. I groaned and rolled over, immediately regretting the movement as my stomach lurched. How much had I drunk last night? Evan was already up. I could hear him downstairs making breakfast for Sasha. The sounds of normal family life felt strange and distant, like I was listening to someone else's life through a wall. I stumbled to the bathroom and caught sight of myself in the mirror. My makeup was smeared, my hair was a disaster, and there were stains on my dress that I didn't want to think too hard about. But worse than my appearance was the slow, creeping realization of what I'd done. Leo, the table, his hands, his office. "Oh God," I whispered to my reflection. "What did I do?" I could hear Evan's footsteps on the stairs. Panic shot through me as I quickly turned on the shower, hoping to wash away the evidence of my night before he could see me like this. "Ferelith?" Evan knocked gently on the bathroom door. "Are you okay? You came in really late last night." "I'm fine," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just need a shower. Too much wine at the party." There was a pause. "I tried calling you. Sasha wanted to say goodnight." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. My 8-year-old daughter had wanted me, and I'd been too busy making a fool of myself to even answer my phone. "Sorry," I said through the door. The music was really loud, I couldn't hear my phone. Another pause. "Okay, well, breakfast is ready when you're done." I stayed in the shower until the water ran cold, trying to piece together exactly what had happened. The dancing I remembered clearly enough. That had been fun, harmless even. But after that, things got fuzzy. Had Leo and I just talked in his office? Had we kissed? Had we done more than that? I couldn't remember, and that terrified me. When I finally came downstairs, Evan was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop, probably catching up on work emails. Sasha was eating cereal and watching cartoons on her tablet. "Morning, Mummy," Sasha said without looking up. "Daddy said you were at a grown-up party." "That's right, sweetheart." I kissed the top of her head, breathing in her familiar little girl smell. It grounded me, reminded me of what was real and important. Evan looked up from his laptop, and I could see the concern in his eyes. "You look tired. Was it a late night?" "Not too late," I lied, pouring myself coffee with hands that shook slightly. "You know how these company things go. Lots of networking." "Right." Evan closed his laptop and really looked at me for the first time. "Hey, you're missing an earring." My hand flew to my ears. He was right. I was only wearing one of my good diamond studs, the ones he'd given me for our anniversary. "Oh," I said, trying to sound casual. "I must have lost it somewhere. I'll check my purse." But I already knew it wasn't in my purse. I had a sinking feeling it was somewhere in Leo's office, and the thought made me feel sick. "Those were expensive," Evan said quietly. "Maybe you should call the office, see if anyone found it." "Yeah, maybe." I busied myself making toast I didn't want, avoiding his gaze. "Ferelith?" Evan's voice was gentle but serious. "Is everything okay? You seem, I don't know, different." The question hung in the air between us. This was my chance to tell him the truth, to confess that I'd made a terrible mistake and beg for his forgiveness. But looking at his kind, trusting face, I couldn't bring myself to do it. "I'm fine," I said instead. "Just tired and hungover." Evan nodded, but I could see he wasn't entirely convinced. "Okay, well, maybe take it easy today. I can handle Sasha's soccer practice if you want to rest." His kindness made the guilt worse. Here he was, being the perfect husband, and I was lying to his face about God knows what I'd done with another man. "Thanks," I managed. "That would be great." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of normal family activities, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. Every time Evan looked at me, I wondered if he could see the guilt written on my face. Every time Sasha hugged me, I felt like a fraud. Around noon, my phone started buzzing with texts from my coworkers. Most were harmless. "Great party last night," and "Hope you're not too hungover." But then I got one from Jennifer in accounting that made my blood run cold. "Girl, you were wild last night. I can't believe you danced on that table. Leo couldn't keep his hands off you." I quickly deleted the message, but not before Evan noticed my phone buzzing. "Popular today," he observed mildly. "Just people talking about the party," I said, shoving the phone in my pocket. But the damage was done. I could see a new wariness in Evan's eyes, a question that hadn't been there before, and I knew with horrible certainty that this was just the beginning. By Sunday evening, I thought I might actually get away with it. Evan had been quiet all weekend, but not suspiciously so, just his usual reserved self. We'd gone to dinner at our favorite bistro downtown with both our mothers, a monthly tradition that I'd been dreading but now felt grateful for. Normal family dinner conversation would be a welcome distraction from the guilt eating away at me. Ruth, Evan's mother, was already seated when we arrived, her silver hair perfectly styled and her disapproving expression already in place. She'd never liked me much, though she tried to hide it for Evan's sake. My own mother, Wendy, sat across from her, looking anxious as always when the two women were in the same room. My sister Tina and her husband Carter completed our party, sliding into the booth just as we were ordering drinks. "Sorry we're late," Tina said breathlessly. "Traffic was insane." Tina was 3 years younger than me, but had always acted like the older sister. She was fiercely protective and had never thought Evan was good enough for me, though she kept that opinion mostly to herself these days. "No problem," Evan said, but I noticed he was checking his phone more than usual. "So," Ruth said, turning to me with that smile that never quite reached her eyes, "Evan tells me you had a work party Friday night. How was it?" "Fine," I said quickly. "Nothing special, just the usual office thing." "Must have been quite a party," Tina said with a grin. "You posted some fun pictures on social media." My blood went cold. I hadn't posted anything on social media. I was always careful about that. But other people had been taking pictures. "I didn't post any pictures," I said carefully. "No, but you were tagged in a bunch of them," Tina continued, pulling out her phone. "Let me show you. There's this great one of you dancing on a table. You look like you're having so much fun." "Tina, don't," I started, but it was too late. She was already turning her phone toward the table, and I watched in horror as everyone leaned in to look. The video was even worse than I'd imagined. There I was, clearly drunk, dancing provocatively on the conference table, while Leo's hands roamed all over my body. The camera had caught everything. The way I was grinding against him, the way his hands lingered on my hips and waist, the way I threw my head back and laughed when he whispered something in my ear. The silence at the table was deafening. Ruth was the first to speak. "Well," she said, her voice ice cold, "that's certainly spirited." Evan was staring at the phone screen with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder, more dangerous. "It's not what it looks like," I said quickly, hating how defensive I sounded. "We were just dancing. Everyone was dancing." "Everyone was dancing on tables with married coworkers?" Ruth asked, her eyebrows raised. "Mom," Evan said quietly, but his eyes never left the phone screen. "I'm just saying," Ruth continued, "when I was married to your father, I never felt the need to—" "It was harmless fun," I interrupted, my voice getting louder. "I'm allowed to have fun, aren't I? I'm allowed to dance at my own company party." "Of course you are, honey," my mother said nervously. "No one's saying you can't have fun." But Tina was frowning now, looking more closely at the video. Wait, who's the guy? He's really handsy. Just a coworker, I said, but my voice cracked slightly. Leo, he's in marketing. Evan finally looked up from the phone. Leo Madsen. My heart stopped. You know him? We've met at a few company events. He's the one who was asking all those questions about you at the Christmas party last year. I didn't remember Leo asking questions about me at the Christmas party, but the way Evan said it made it sound significant. What kind of questions? Carter asked. He'd been silent up until now, but I could see he was uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. Personal ones, Evan said, still looking directly at me. About our marriage. About whether you were happy. The words hit me like a slap. Had Leo been planning this? Had he been targeting me? That's ridiculous, I said, but even I could hear how weak it sounded. Is it? Ruth leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like he got exactly what he was after. Nothing happened, I snapped, finally losing my temper. We danced, that's all. You're all acting like I committed some kind of crime. Ferelith, Evan said quietly. Can we talk about this at home? No, let's talk about it now, I said, the wine I'd ordered making me reckless, since everyone seems to have opinions about my behavior. Your behavior? Ruth's voice was getting louder now. You're a married woman with a child, dancing like a what? I challenged her. Say it. Mom, please, Evan said again, but Ruth was on a roll now. Like someone who's forgotten her responsibilities to her family, she finished. That's when I completely lost it. My responsibilities? I stood up so quickly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. What about Evan's responsibilities to me? When's the last time he made me feel beautiful, or desirable, or like anything other than a live-in housekeeper? The entire restaurant seemed to go quiet. I could feel other diners turning to stare at our table. Ferelith, sit down, Evan said, his voice deadly calm. No, I won't sit down. I'm tired of everyone acting like I'm the villain here. I danced at a party. I had fun. I'm sorry if that threatens your perfect little image of me, but maybe that's your problem, not mine. Tina was looking at me with something like admiration, but everyone else looked horrified. My mother was practically in tears, and Ruth looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. That's when my phone buzzed. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen. It was a text from Leo. Hey, about Friday night, we should probably talk. Things got a little intense. I quickly flipped the phone over, but not before Evan saw the notification. Who is that? He asked, his voice still terrifyingly calm. No one, I said automatically. Show me the phone. Evan, don't be ridiculous. Show me the phone, Ferelith. The way he said my name with such cold authority made me realize I was in deeper trouble than I'd thought, but I was in too deep to back down now. I don't have to show you anything, I said. I'm not a child. Evan stood up slowly, pulling out his wallet and dropping enough cash on the table to cover our meal. I need some air, he said to the table in general. Then, looking directly at me, we'll finish this conversation at home. He walked out of the restaurant without another word, leaving me standing there with 5 pairs of eyes staring at me, in various states of shock and disappointment. I sat back down heavily, suddenly feeling very sober and very alone. Honey, my mother said softly, maybe you should go after him. But I was too proud and too scared to move. Instead, I ordered another glass of wine and tried to pretend that my marriage wasn't falling apart right in front of everyone I cared about. Monday morning came too soon. I'd barely slept, replaying the disastrous dinner over and over in my mind. Evan had been asleep when I finally got home, and he was gone when I woke up. An early meeting, according to the note he'd left on the kitchen counter. I called in sick to work. I couldn't face the office yet, couldn't deal with the knowing looks and whispered conversations I was sure would be waiting for me. Instead, I asked my mother to watch Sasha and drove to the coffee shop near Tina's house. Tina was already there when I arrived, her expression more serious than I'd expected. "You look terrible," she said as I slumped into the chair across from her. "Thanks, that's exactly what I needed to hear. Ferelith, we need to talk, really talk." Tina leaned forward, her voice low. "What the hell happened Friday night?" I'd been preparing for this conversation all morning, but now that it was here, I didn't know where to start. "I made a mistake," I said finally. "What kind of mistake?" I looked around the coffee shop, making sure no one was listening. "I don't remember everything. I was drunk, but Leo and we went to his office after the dancing, and I think something happened." Tina's eyes widened. "You think?" "Ferelith, either something happened or it didn't." "I was drunk, Tina, really drunk. I remember kissing him, but after that..." I shrugged helplessly. "Jesus." Tina sat back in her chair. "And Evan suspects. More than suspects. You saw him last night, and he saw that text from Leo." "What did the text say exactly?" I showed her my phone and watched her face fall as she read it. Things got intense. "Ferelith, that doesn't sound like just kissing." The words I'd been trying not to think were finally spoken out loud, and they hit me like a physical blow. "I know," I whispered. "I know." "Okay." Tina was in problem-solving mode now, the way she'd been when we were kids and I'd gotten in trouble. "Here's what we need to do. First, you need to figure out exactly what happened. Call Leo, meet him somewhere private, get the story straight." "I can't call Leo. That would just make things worse." "Worse than not knowing. Ferelith, if Evan is as suspicious as you say he is, he's not going to just let this go. You need to know what you're dealing with." She was right, but the thought of talking to Leo made me feel sick. What if he told me we'd slept together? What if he had evidence? "Second," Tina continued, "you need to get ahead of this with Evan. Control the narrative. Make him understand that whatever happened, it was because he's been neglecting you emotionally." "You think this is Evan's fault?" "I think you don't just randomly hook up with a coworker unless something is missing at home," Tina said firmly. "And I've been watching you two for years, Ferelith. When's the last time Evan really paid attention to you? When's the last time he made you feel special?" Her words echoed what I'd been thinking, what I'd been telling myself to justify what I'd done. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was as much Evan's fault as mine. "He has been distant lately," I admitted. "Exactly. You're not the villain here, Ferelith. You're a woman who made a mistake because her husband stopped making her feel loved." I wanted to believe her. It would be so much easier if this was Evan's fault, if I was just a victim of his emotional neglect. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my boss, Mr. Beale, from HR. "I have to take this," I told Tina, stepping outside. "Ferelith," Mr. Beale's voice was formal, professional. "I need you to come in this afternoon. We have some things to discuss." My stomach dropped. "Is this about Friday night?" "We'll discuss it when you get here. Can you be in my office at 2? "Yes, sir." I hung up and walked back to Tina, my hands shaking. "What was that about?" she asked. "Work. I think someone complained about the party." "Who would complain? Everyone was having fun." "I don't know, but I have to go in at 2. Tina reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "It'll be okay. You'll figure this out, and whatever happens, you have me and Carter on your side." But as I drove home to shower and change for my meeting with Mr. Beale, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control faster than I could manage them. The house was empty when I got there. Evan was still at work, and Sasha was still with my mother. I should have been grateful for the privacy, but instead the silence felt ominous. I was getting dressed when I heard Evan's car in the driveway. He was home early, which wasn't like him. "Ferelith?" he called from downstairs. "Up here," I called back, my voice artificially cheerful. He appeared in the bedroom doorway, and I could immediately tell something had changed. The concern from yesterday had been replaced by something harder, more determined. "We need to talk," he said. "I have to go to work. Mr. Beale wants to see me." "I know. He called me too." My blood went cold. He called you? Why would he call you? Evan sat down on the edge of the bed, his expression unreadable. Because someone filed a complaint about your behavior at the party, and because, as your emergency contact, they wanted to make sure I was aware that there might be disciplinary action. The room seemed to spin around me. Disciplinary action? Ferelith, I've seen the videos. Plural. There are at least 3 different angles of you and Leo on that table, and apparently security cameras caught you going into his office together at 11:47 p.m. and not coming out until after midnight. I sat down heavily on the bed beside him. How do you know all this? Because I spent the morning making some calls. Leo's married too, did you know that? His wife is 8 months pregnant. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. Pregnant. Leo had a pregnant wife at home while we were... I didn't know, I whispered. His wife knows now. Apparently someone sent her the videos. I was going to be sick. This wasn't just about me and Evan anymore. There was another family being destroyed, another woman being humiliated. Evan, don't. He held up a hand to stop me. Just don't. I don't want to hear explanations or excuses or justifications. I want to know one thing. Did you sleep with him? The question hung in the air between us. This was it, my last chance to tell the truth, to salvage whatever might be left of our marriage. But I still didn't know the answer. I don't remember, I said finally. Evan stared at me for a long moment, then stood up. That's not good enough, Ferelith. That's not nearly good enough. He walked out of the room, and I heard his footsteps going down the hall to his home office. A few minutes later, I heard the printer running. Whatever he was printing, I had a feeling it wasn't good news for me. The meeting with Mr. Beale was even worse than I'd imagined. He'd shown me printouts of the complaint, filed by Jennifer from accounting, of all people, along with screenshots from social media and witness statements from 3 different coworkers. The security footage timestamps were damning. Leo and I had been in his office for over an hour. I'm recommending a 2-week suspension without pay, Mr. Beale had said, his voice carefully neutral, and mandatory counseling before you return to work. This kind of behavior reflects poorly on the entire HR department. I'd nodded and signed the paperwork, too numb to argue. 2 weeks without pay we couldn't afford, and the humiliation of everyone knowing why I was being suspended. Now I was sitting in my car in our driveway, afraid to go inside. Evan's car was there, but so was Ruth's. The last thing I needed was another confrontation with my mother-in-law. I finally worked up the courage to go in around 6:30. I could hear voices in the kitchen, Evan and Ruth talking in low, serious tones. They stopped when I walked in. "Where's Sasha?" I asked. "Upstairs doing homework," Evan said without looking at me. Ruth was sitting at our kitchen table like she owned the place, a cup of tea in front of her, and an expression of barely contained disgust on her face. "So," she said without preamble, "how did your meeting go?" "Fine," I lied. "Really? Because Evan tells me you've been suspended." I shot a look at my husband. "You told her?" "She's going to be watching Sasha while we figure this out," Evan said calmly. "She needed to know why you won't be working." "Figure what out?" But even as I asked the question, I could see the answer in both their faces. "Our marriage," Evan said simply, "whether we have one anymore." Ruth stood up, smoothing down her skirt. "I think I'll go check on Sasha. Let you two talk." She paused beside me on her way out of the kitchen. "I hope whatever you got from that man was worth it," she said quietly, "because you've destroyed a good family for it." After she left, Evan and I stood in our kitchen in silence. This room had seen so many family dinners, so many ordinary moments of our life together. Now it felt like a courtroom. "I talked to Leo today," Evan said finally. My heart stopped. "You what?" "I called his office. Had a very interesting conversation." Evan leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "Want to know what he told me?" I couldn't speak. I could only nod. "He said you came on to him. Said you'd been flirting with him for months. complaining about your marriage, about how I didn't appreciate you. He said Friday night you practically threw yourself at him. That's not true, I whispered. But even as I said it, I wondered if it was. Had I been flirting with Leo? Had I been complaining about Evan? He also said you slept together, in his office, on his desk. The words hit me like physical blows. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs, my legs unable to support me anymore. He's lying, I said, but my voice had no conviction. Is he? Because he had details. Ferelith, very specific details about your body, about things you said, about what you did together. I put my head in my hands. Whether I remembered it or not, it had happened. I'd cheated on my husband, destroyed my marriage, humiliated my family, all for one night with a man who was now throwing me under the bus to save his own marriage. I was drunk, I said weakly. I didn't mean for it to happen. But it did happen. Yes. The word came out as barely a whisper. It happened. Evan was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, colder, more distant than I'd ever heard it. I've been thinking about this all day, he said, trying to understand how we got here. And you know what I realized? This isn't really about one night. This is about who you are. What do you mean? I mean you've been lying to me for months, maybe years, pretending to be someone you're not. The woman I married wouldn't have done this. The mother of my child wouldn't have done this. I am still the mother of your child, I said desperately. I'm still your wife. Are you? Because the woman I married took responsibility for her actions. She didn't blame other people for her choices. I'm not blaming anyone else. Aren't you? Earlier you said this was my fault for not making you feel appreciated. Your sister thinks I drove you to it by being emotionally distant. Everyone seems to think I'm the real villain here. He was right. I had been blaming him, at least partially. It was easier than accepting full responsibility for what I'd done. I made a mistake, I said, a terrible mistake. But it was one night, Evan. One stupid, drunken night. We can get past this. Evan walked over to the kitchen table and sat down across from me. For a moment, I thought maybe he was going to forgive me. Maybe we could work through this together. Instead, he pulled out a manila folder I hadn't noticed before. I don't think we can, he said, opening the folder, because this wasn't just one night. This was a choice, a series of choices, and now I have to make some choices of my own. The folder was full of papers, printouts, photographs, official-looking documents. What is all this? I asked, though I was afraid to know. Evidence, Evan said simply, of your affair, your lies, your complete disregard for our family. He spread the papers out on the table, like he was laying down cards in a poker game. There were printouts of text messages I didn't remember sending, photos from the party I didn't know existed, witness statements from coworkers, even a timeline of my movements that night based on security footage and credit card receipts. How did you get all this? I asked, staring at the evidence of my betrayal laid out in black and white. I'm good at research, Ferelith. It's what I do for a living. His voice was matter-of-fact, almost conversational. Amazing what you can find when you really start looking. At the bottom of the pile was a business card. I picked it up with shaking hands. Morrison and Associates, Family Law, I read aloud. I have an appointment tomorrow morning, Evan said, to discuss my options. The reality of what was happening finally hit me. This wasn't a fight we were going to have and then make up from. This wasn't something we were going to work through in counseling. This was the end. You're divorcing me, I said. I'm considering it very seriously. What about Sasha? What about our family? You should have thought about that before you fucked another man in his office. The crude language was so unlike Evan that it shocked me into silence. In 10 years of marriage, I'd never heard him talk like that. I want you to stay somewhere else tonight, he continued. My mother is going to stay here with Sasha and me. You can go to your sister's. This is my house too. Not for much longer. I stared at him. This man I'd been married to for 10 years, and realized I didn't recognize him anymore. The gentle, conflict-avoiding Evan I'd married was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating and absolutely determined. "I'm sorry," I said one more time, knowing it wasn't enough, but not knowing what else to say. "So am I," Evan replied. "Sorry I wasted 10 years of my life on someone who could throw away everything we built for one night with a coworker who doesn't even respect you enough to keep it private." He stood up and started gathering the papers back into the folder. "Pack a bag, Ferelith. I want you gone in an hour." As I climbed the stairs to pack, I could hear him on the phone with someone, his voice calm and professional, as he discussed legal strategies and custody arrangements. My marriage was over, and I had no one to blame but myself. 3 weeks later, I sat in the offices of Morrison and Associates, feeling like I was attending my own funeral. The conference room was all polished wood and leather chairs, the kind of place where important decisions were made and lives were changed forever. Evan sat across from me with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Morrison, who looked like she could dismantle someone's life with a smile. My own lawyer, a public defender named David Chen, who I'd barely been able to afford, looked overwhelmed by the stack of evidence Patricia had brought. Ruth sat behind Evan, her presence a silent show of support. My own mother sat behind me, but I could feel her disappointment radiating like heat. Tina had come too, but even she seemed subdued by the formality of the proceedings. "Let's begin," Patricia said, opening the thick folder that had become the symbol of my downfall. "My client is seeking dissolution of marriage on grounds of adultery, with full custody of the minor child and exclusive occupancy of the marital home." David shuffled through his own much thinner folder. "My client is willing to accept responsibility for her actions, but we believe the custody arrangement should be joint, and she has rights to marital property." "Does she?" Patricia interrupted smoothly. "Because according to the evidence we've compiled, Mrs. Crane's behavior has been both reckless and damaging to the family unit." She began laying out photographs on the conference table. The party photos were bad enough, but there were others I hadn't seen before. Screenshots of text messages, credit card receipts, even a photo of my earring, the one I'd lost, sitting on Leo's desk. Security footage shows Mrs. Crane entering Mr. Madsen's office at 11:47 p.m. and not leaving until 12:52 a.m., Patricia continued. "Mr. Madsen has provided a detailed statement about what occurred during that time." She slid a typed statement across the table. I couldn't bring myself to read it, but David did, his face growing paler with each line. "Furthermore," Patricia continued, "Mrs. Crane's behavior has resulted in disciplinary action at her workplace and has caused significant emotional distress to the minor child, who has been exhibiting signs of anxiety and behavioral problems since the incident." That hit me harder than anything else. Sasha was having problems because of what I'd done. My sweet, innocent 8-year-old daughter was suffering because her mother had been too selfish and stupid to think about consequences. "What kind of behavioral problems?" I asked, speaking for the first time since we'd sat down. Evan looked at me directly for the first time in weeks. "Nightmares, bedwetting. She's been asking why Mommy doesn't live here anymore. Why Grandma Ruth has to help her with homework instead of you." Tears started running down my face. "I want to see her." "That's what we're here to determine," Patricia said crisply. "Mr. Crane is not unreasonable. He's willing to allow supervised visitation, provided Mrs. Crane undergoes counseling and maintains stable employment." "Supervised?" I looked at David desperately. "She's my daughter. I've never hurt her." "You've hurt her by destroying her family," Ruth said quietly from behind Evan. It was the first time she'd spoken, and her words carried the weight of absolute judgment. Patricia pulled out another document. "This is a psychological evaluation of the minor child conducted by Dr. Sarah Williams. She recommends limited contact with the mother until family counseling can address the child's anxiety and trust issues." I felt like I was drowning. Everything I'd cared about, everything I'd built my life around, was being systematically taken away from me. "What about the house?" David asked weakly. "Mr. Crane will buy out Mrs. Crane's interest at current market value, minus the costs of counseling for the child, legal fees, and damages related to Mrs. Crane's workplace suspension." Patricia slid a calculator across the table. "After all deductions, Mrs. Crane's share comes to approximately $18,000. $18,000. That was what was left of my 10-year marriage. My stake in the home where I'd raised my daughter." "This is vindictive," Tina said suddenly, speaking up for the first time. "Evan, you're being cruel. She made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve to lose everything." Evan turned to look at my sister, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before, a cold, calculated anger that was more frightening than any shouting match would have been. "A mistake," he said quietly. "She didn't accidentally trip and fall onto another man's dick, Tina. She made a choice, a series of choices, and now she gets to live with the consequences." The crude language, so unlike the Evan I'd married, silenced the room. Patricia pulled out the final document. The divorce decree. Mrs. Crane keeps her car, her personal belongings, and the $18,000 settlement. Mr. Crane keeps the house, primary custody of the child, and all other marital assets. Mrs. Crane will have supervised visitation every other weekend, pending successful completion of counseling. She slid the papers across to David, who looked at them with resignation. "This is very generous, considering the circumstances," Patricia said. "I'd advise your client to sign." I looked around the room at the faces of people who had once loved me, or at least tolerated me. Ruth looked satisfied. My mother looked heartbroken. Tina looked angry but defeated. And Evan looked like a stranger. "I need a minute," I said. "Of course." Patricia checked her watch. "We'll give you 5 minutes to discuss with your counsel." Everyone else left the conference room, leaving me alone with David. "They have you dead to rights," he said bluntly. "The evidence is overwhelming, and frankly, the settlement is better than what most judges would give you in a contested divorce. If you fight this, you could end up with even less." "What if I refuse to sign?" "Then this goes to court, becomes public record, and you'll spend what little money you have left on legal fees. And you'll probably still lose." I thought about Sasha, about the nightmares and bedwetting that were my fault. I thought about the videos that would be played in open court, the testimony from Coworkers, and Leo himself. I thought about the complete humiliation of having my stupidity and selfishness examined by strangers. When everyone came back into the room, I was ready. "I'll sign," I said quietly. Patricia smiled, not unkindly, but with professional satisfaction. "I think that's wise." As I signed my name on page after page, legally dissolving my marriage and giving up my rights to the life I'd built, I kept thinking about that night at the party. One night of feeling desired and exciting and free. One night that had cost me everything. When it was over, Evan stood up to leave. For a moment, I thought he might say something to me, some final word of forgiveness or regret or even anger. Instead, he just looked at me with something like pity. "I hope it was worth it, Ferelith," he said quietly. "I really do." Then he walked out, followed by Ruth and his lawyer, leaving me sitting in that expensive conference room with the ruins of my life spread out on the polished table. My mother came over and put her hand on my shoulder. "What will you do now?" she asked softly. I looked at the settlement check in my hand, $18,000 to start over with. It seemed like such a small amount for a 10-year marriage, for the family I'd destroyed, for the trust I'd shattered. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I really don't know." But as I walked out of that office building into the bright afternoon sun, I realized something that should have been obvious weeks ago. Evan was right. The woman who had danced on that table, who had thrown away everything for one night with a man who didn't even respect her, wasn't the person I'd thought I was. She was exactly who I'd chosen to become. And now I had to live with that choice for the rest of my life. 6 months later, I was working as a receptionist at a dental office, living in a studio apartment across town, and seeing Sasha every other weekend under the watchful eye of a court-appointed supervisor. Evan had remarried, a quiet, kind woman from his church who Sasha already called Mom Number 2. I never did remember everything that happened in Leo's office that night, but I remembered enough to know that whatever I'd thought I was looking for, excitement, validation, freedom, it hadn't been worth the price I'd paid. The videos from the party had eventually been taken down from social media, but screenshots lived forever. Sometimes I'd catch former coworkers looking at me with a mixture of pity and disgust when I ran into them at the grocery store. Leo had managed to save his marriage somehow. His wife had forgiven him, or at least decided that a new baby was more important than old grievances. He'd been transferred to another department and we never spoke again. But the real punishment wasn't the divorce, or the custody arrangement, or the financial ruin. It was the look in Sasha's eyes during our supervised visits, confused, hurt, and increasingly distant. She was polite to me now, the way children are polite to strangers, and that was worse than any legal judgment could have been. I'd gotten exactly what I'd asked for that night at the party. I'd felt desired and exciting and free. I just hadn't realized that freedom would mean being free from everything I'd actually cared about.